Amina stood at the edge of the long dining table, her hands clenched together beneath her shawl. The large ancestral home was buzzing with relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins, family friends, summoned under the guise of a grand family celebration. Yet the air was heavy, and the smiles were forced. Amina felt it. Something was off. Her father, Chief Musa, rose from the head of the table, his gold-trimmed agbada flowing as he cleared his throat. Silence followed instantly. His gaze scanned the room before settling on Amina. She straightened up, unsure of what was coming, though her heart thudded with an unexplainable dread. "Today," he began, "we make an important decision for the dignity of our family." Murmurs spread through the room. Amina's brows furrowed. She took a step forward, confused. Chief Musa's voice grew sharper. "This daughter, Amina, has brought disgrace and shame upon this house. Her choices, her lifestyle, her defiance. I can no longer allow it." Gasps echoed around the room. Amina's breath caught in her throat. Her father continued without a flicker of emotion. "Effective immediately, she is removed from all family records. Her name shall no longer be associated with ours. She is not to inherit anything. No land, no shares, no legacy." A hush fell, followed by the sound of a crisp paper unfolding. Chief Musa held up a signed legal document. "All assets and inheritance will go to my son, Hamid, who has always brought pride to this family." Cheers erupted. Clapping followed. Amina stood frozen, every heartbeat echoing like a gunshot in her ears. Her mother sat silently beside her father, her eyes cast down, her lips sealed. Amina's face remained calm, but her spirit cracked. Years of pain, rejection, and silence had led to this moment, a final betrayal. Her own blood had cut her off like she never belonged. She felt eyes on her, mocking, pitying, gleeful. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just turned. As she walked out of the house that night, the wind caught her shawl like wings. Her head was high, but inside her heart trembled. Every step away from the house felt like walking away from a grave she'd once called home. But deep within her brokenness, something sparked. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was the quiet, powerful resolve of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The smell of palm oil and incense always reminded Amina of her childhood home, warm on the surface, but suffocating if you stayed too long. Growing up in a house filled with noise, celebration, and status, Amina had learned very early that silence could be louder than a slap, especially when directed at her. Hamid, her older brother by 3 years, was the golden boy. He was the firstborn son, the heir, the future of Chief Musa's legacy. From the moment he could walk, people called him Modagwu, the little chief. He got the finest school uniforms, the newest electronics, private tutors, and a room filled with trophies he didn't earn, yet was celebrated as if he had. Amina, on the other hand, existed in the shadows of that brightness. She wore Hamid's old clothes until they stopped fitting. Her school bags were hand-me-downs from cousins who'd already scribbled through the pages. Birthdays passed like regular days, often forgotten entirely. If she ever dared to speak up, her father would narrow his eyes and mutter, "You're lucky we even feed you." Her mother never argued. She never defended Amina. At most, she'd pass her an extra spoonful of stew when no one was looking. But her silence spoke louder than any shout ever could. It told Amina she was alone. Despite everything, Amina found a strange kind of sanctuary in school. Books didn't judge her. Numbers didn't care about her last name. Teachers, though distant, recognized her brilliance when she spoke in class or aced tests. She earned the top marks every term. Her school reports were immaculate, but when she brought them home, her father would toss them aside with a grunt. All wise, ask if Hamid scored higher. No hugs, no praise, just indifference. Once, she overheard her father speaking to a guest. "Amina, she wasn't planned. Just another burden we had to bear." Those words etched themselves deep into her being. She began to see herself not as someone unwanted, but as someone who had survived despite being unwanted. In private moments, she'd pretend she was someone else. A writer, a lawyer, a businesswoman, someone whose name held weight. She'd stare in the mirror and speak affirmations no one else would say to her. You are not a mistake. You are not worthless. You will not be invisible forever. But that fantasy would fade the moment her father entered the room. The older she grew, the more invisible she became in that house. Her achievements became routine. Her presence became optional. When guests came over, she wasn't introduced. When Hamid achieved something trivial, it became a family celebration. When she was accepted into university on a scholarship, no one even asked which course she picked. Yet with each cold glance and cruel dismissal, something resilient began to bloom inside her. Like a seed that survives in dry, cracked earth, Amina's spirit learned how to bend without breaking. She learned to be her own cheerleader, her own protector, her own home. And while the child in her longed for love that never came, the woman in her was slowly being forged in silence, tempered like iron in fire. They didn't know it yet, but in trying to erase her, they were building someone unforgettable. The echo of clapping still rang in Amina's ears as she stuffed her few belongings into a tattered duffel bag. Her hands moved automatically, folding, packing, zipping, but her mind was numb. That morning she had a family. By nightfall, she had none. The name she had carried since birth had been publicly severed like a torn thread. There was no long goodbye, no final stare at the marble floors or family portraits. She didn't cry, not even when her mother closed the bedroom door behind her and said nothing at all. With barely 5,000 naira in her pocket and no place to stay, Amina stepped into the night. The city she'd grown up in suddenly felt hostile, too big for someone no longer claimed by anyone. She boarded the first affordable long-distance bus heading away from the city, no destination in mind, just the overwhelming urge to escape. The journey was long, the seats stiff, the other passengers asleep. But Amina stayed wide awake, watching the moonlight ripple across the windows, her thoughts racing. She thought of Hamid's smug smile, of the family members who clapped, of the ones who said nothing. She thought of all the birthdays that went uncelebrated, all the nights she had prayed for just a little warmth that never came. By morning, the bus dropped her in a small, dusty town she didn't even know the name of. There were no skyscrapers, no designer shops, no glimmer of her old life. But there was air, and quiet, and a strange kind of peace. She wandered for hours before stumbling upon a women's hostel run by a retired midwife named Mima Tainu. The old woman didn't ask many questions, just handed Amina a key and said, "First week is free. You look like someone trying to breathe again." Amina found a job waiting tables at a roadside canteen the very next day. The pay was barely enough for food and shelter, but she didn't care. She liked the rhythm of wiping tables, taking orders, serving plates. It kept her body moving while her soul began to rest. Nights were the hardest. That's when silence crept in, reminding her of everything she had lost. But slowly, small dreams began to flicker, like tiny flames refusing to die. She started sketching again. Ideas for fabrics, patterns, logos. Just for herself, just to feel like she still had something unique to offer. She walked to the local library and read books on business, branding, and finance. She listened to motivational talks on a borrowed phone. She wrote down goals in a second-hand notebook. Learn, grow, become, be my own legacy. She didn't know how or when, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had escaped the cage they built for her. And out here, broken, alone, but free, she would learn how to fly. The first time Amina sold a head wrap she had sewn by hand, she cried. It wasn't the money. It was barely enough to cover her bus fare for the week. It was the validation. Someone, somewhere, had seen her work and thought it was worth paying for. After years of being told she was worthless, that one sale felt like a whisper from the universe. You matter. Keep going. By day, Amina continued working at the canteen. But at night, she transformed her small hostel room into a makeshift workshop. The table became her sewing station. A plastic chair doubled as a mannequin. Scraps of fabric, beads, thread, and needles became her language. She poured her pain into patterns, her silence into stitches. With the help of a kind librarian, she learned to open a simple online shop. She gave her brand a name that carried personal weight, reclaimed. It was more than fabric. It was her statement. Every piece she made was crafted with care, sustainability, and strength. And each one was modeled on herself. Not in the literal sense, but in the story. Women who had been told they were too little, too late, too much. Women who, like her, had something to prove. Within a year, she had gathered 4 other women at the hostel, domestic violence survivors, single mothers, outcast daughters, teaching them the basics of sewing and design. They shared stories while they worked, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always healing. With time, her small business gained local traction. Orders trickled in, first from nearby towns, then from major Nigerian cities. She reinvested every naira. No flashy lifestyle, no shortcuts, just relentless effort and an unshakable vision. Her break came when a lifestyle blogger featured one of her handcrafted wraps on Instagram. The post went viral. Suddenly, Reclaimed became a name people remembered. Amina didn't slow down. She applied for a small business development grant and got it. With that money, she opened a modest workshop and employed 10 full-time women. She hosted pop-ups at fairs and created catalogs. Each product came with a handwritten note. You are not forgotten. You are not broken. You are worthy. She still took night courses, walking 30 minutes to a community college where she studied marketing, digital branding, and basic accounting. One day, she applied, on a day from a friend, for an international MBA scholarship. When the acceptance email arrived, she froze in disbelief. Full tuition, housing, a place in a top-tier global business school in Nairobi. In Nairobi, she thrived. She was no longer just a woman with a painful past. She was now Amina Musa, founder, designer, leader, and speaker. Business magazines began featuring her story. She was invited to panels on women's empowerment, fashion sustainability, and ethical entrepreneurship. But success didn't make her arrogant. It made her aware. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be cut off, to be erased. So she made it her mission to ensure other women like her never felt that way again. She moved into a new apartment with light-filled windows and a balcony garden. No family photos hung on the walls, only framed affirmations, handwritten by the women she'd helped. She now wore heels not to impress, but because they made her feel tall in a world that once tried to shrink her. Amina didn't just survive what her family did to her. She transformed it. She had become the woman they never believed she could be. And she owed it to no one but herself. While Amina was building herself from scratch, back home the empire Hamid inherited was slowly crumbling. It didn't happen overnight. In the beginning, things seemed promising. Hamid flaunted his new title as CEO, took photos in luxurious offices, and surrounded himself with yes-men who praised every reckless idea he had. He hosted lavish launch parties, rebranded the family business with flashy new logos, and spent more time posing for social media than reviewing financial reports. He believed success was automatic, his birthright, handed down through blood and applause. But he lacked vision, and he lacked discipline. The old, trusted employees, those who had built the company from the ground up, quietly began to leave. They were replaced by inexperienced friends and distant cousins who knew nothing of strategy, only how to say yes to Hamid's ego. Within 2 years, the cracks began to show. Projects ran over budget. Deadlines slipped. Big clients started pulling out, whispering about mismanagement and delays. Loans were taken to cover the losses, but instead of reinvesting, Hamid used much of the money to maintain his lavish lifestyle. Imported cars, exotic vacations, gold watches, and a mansion far beyond his means. One by one, vendors stopped supplying. Banks called in debts. Government taxes that had gone unpaid came knocking. Court notices piled up. Investors backed out. The company's name, once associated with excellence, became a warning sign in the industry. Chief Musa, now aging and already rattled by Amina's departure, couldn't believe what was happening. The empire he had spent a lifetime building was disintegrating in the hands of the very son he had placed all his hopes in. Then came the stroke. It struck one quiet morning as he reviewed a report showing massive losses. His right side went numb. The pen dropped from his hand. By the time the driver rushed him to the hospital, his speech was slurred, and he could no longer walk. The shock broke his spirit. At home, Amina's mother, who had once sat quietly while her daughter was humiliated, now found herself managing hospital bills and medication with shrinking resources. The woman who once lived in silk robes now sold jewelry in secret to buy food. Hamid, overwhelmed, panicked. His charm no longer worked. Friends disappeared. Calls went unanswered. No one came to the parties anymore, because there were no parties. What once was a proud house turned into a dim, bitter cage filled with resentment and regret. The same relatives who had clapped for Hamid's rise now avoided their calls. The same father who removed Amina's name from the family line now sat in silence, staring blankly at the ceiling, unable to utter the words he once used so freely. Pride, legacy, honor. And as their world collapsed around them, not one of them realized that the woman they cast aside was rising higher than they ever dreamed. The message came late one evening, a casual voice note from a distant cousin Amina hadn't spoken to in years. Have you heard about your family? Things are bad, really bad. Your father can't walk. Hamid's company is gone. They are barely surviving. Amina listened in silence, her fingers tapping gently on her coffee mug. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The world had turned, as it always does. But what no one expected was that the girl they once erased would now be the one holding the map back to mercy. 2 weeks later, a sleek black SUV rolled quietly into the city. It didn't turn heads because Amina didn't want it to. Her success wasn't for show. It was for herself. She wore a crisp navy jumpsuit and low heels, her braids wrapped elegantly behind her head. No gold, no designer logos. Just quiet power. She didn't go to her old home. Not yet. She booked a private service apartment on the other side of town. She walked through her old neighborhood in disguise. Sunglasses, scarf, silence. What she saw both hurt and confirmed what she'd heard. The house once filled with music and voices now looked tired. Paint chipped. Flowers wilted. Curtains drawn. She didn't weep. She didn't smile either. She acted. That very night, she contacted a private home care agency and arranged for round-the-clock nursing support for her father. She made sure the best medicine was delivered to the house every week, no name attached. For her mother, she arranged nutritious food hampers, fruit baskets, and wool shawls to be delivered every 3 days. Again, no name. She hired a discreet cleaning crew to sanitize and restore the home. For Hamid, she arranged nothing. But the silence of her generosity echoed through the house like thunder. Hamid grew paranoid. He paced the house asking questions no one could answer. Who's sending these things? Who's paying for this nurse? These medicines aren't cheap. Someone's helping us. Their mother remained quiet. Somewhere in her heart, she already knew. Chief Musa, now half-paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair, was often seen staring out the window, his lips trying to form words that wouldn't come. Regret weighed heavier than his failing body. One afternoon, the nurse told them someone had arranged for a specialist to visit from abroad, at no cost. Hamid nearly choked on his tea. That doesn't happen for free, he muttered. Still, he refused to say her name. Maybe because he knew saying it would taste like shame. Amina watched all this from a distance, never revealing herself. She had no intention of playing savior. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't revenge either. This was closure on her own terms. She gave not because they deserved it, but because she deserved to give without being defined by their cruelty. She wasn't the girl with trembling hands anymore. She was a woman with quiet means and deeper strength. And as her family wondered who their mystery benefactor was, Amina sat on a rooftop across the city, sipping mint tea, eyes on the skyline. Let them guess. Let them feel, for once, what it's like to be cared for by someone they chose to forget. The truth came out on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon. Hamid had insisted on speaking to the delivery man, the one who'd brought their mother's new wheelchair, wrapped in velvet ribbons. Hamid's nerves had been on edge for weeks, and when the man casually mentioned a name on the invoice that matched Amina's foundation, the Worthy Ones initiative, his entire body went cold. He didn't speak, just turned around and walked into the house, slowly, like a man waking from a dream that had lasted too long. That evening, Amina arrived unannounced. No security, no grand entrance. Just her, standing at the gate in a crisp white blouse, black trousers, and her signature calm. Her hair was pulled back, her face without makeup, her eyes full of power and peace. The maid froze when she opened the gate. "Amina," she whispered. Amina simply smiled. Word spread through the house like wildfire. Hamid came out first, his expression blank, but his hands trembling. Their mother followed, tears already brimming in her tired eyes. And finally, Chief Musa, wheeled into the living room by a nurse, saw his daughter for the first time in years. No one spoke. Amina stepped forward and placed a small envelope on the table. "It was me," she said quietly. "The medicines, the care, the food, the doctors." Her voice didn't carry judgment, just truth. Her father's lips trembled. His one working hand reached out weakly. He choked. "We gave you nothing, yet you gave us everything." His words broke into sobs. He covered his face, shoulders shaking. Amina looked at him, not with anger, but with something deeper, acceptance. "You removed me from your name," she said softly, "but I built my own, and it's worth more than anything you ever gave me." Hamid, still frozen in place, couldn't lift his eyes. His pride, once towering, had crumbled into dust. He looked down at his hands, then slowly backed into a chair, eyes wet with silent shame. Their mother stepped forward, her voice cracking. "We were wrong, Amina. All of us. I was silent when I should have spoken." Amina nodded, and that silence became my strength. As the family sat in the heavy air of their regrets, relatives began to arrive, summoned by habit, not invitation. They had heard she was back. One by one, they entered the room expecting drama, expecting spectacle. But instead, they found Amina standing tall, poised, and unshaken, while Chief Musa wept in his chair and Hamid sat with his head bowed low. No one clapped this time. The same aunts who once laughed in approval now avoided her gaze. The same uncles who applauded her removal now shifted awkwardly in their seats. Guilt wrapped around the room like smoke. Amina turned to them all. "I didn't come back for apologies. I came back to close the door you tried to slam on me. I don't hate you. I just don't need you." With that, she walked out. No anger, no tears, no looking back. Only grace. And the sound of truth hanging in the air long after her footsteps faded. Months passed, but the whispers of Amina's return echoed far beyond her family's walls. What began as a silent act of dignity soon became a movement. Amina didn't linger in the past. She poured her energy into the future, into the worthy ones, a foundation built not from vengeance but from purpose. It started with a single rented building in the outskirts of the city, painted bright yellow, filled with donated books, sewing machines, and music. It became a safe space for children abandoned by their families, runaways, orphans, girls labeled as too much, boys told they'd never amount to anything. Amina walked through the halls daily, learning every name, listening to every story. She told them not to erase who they were, but to rebuild from it. Word spread quickly. Journalists called. Invitations came from across the continent. Soon, Amina was speaking at women's empowerment summits in Lagos, then Nairobi, then Johannesburg. Her TEDx talk, "The Power of the Unnamed," went viral. Dressed simply, her voice calm, she told the world about the night her father removed her name, and how that moment birthed the most powerful name she'd ever carried, her own. "You don't need their seat at the table," she told the crowd. "Build your own table, and then leave it open for others like you." She graced magazine covers, not for her style, but for her substance. Brands offered her deals, but she only partnered with companies that supported education, mental health, and women-led enterprises. She didn't forget the pain, but she no longer let it define her. Back in her quiet home, her life was full of laughter, purpose, and the peace that comes only when you no longer need validation from anyone. One evening, before a keynote gala, Amina stood in front of a mirror. She wore a tailored emerald green dress, Her hair swept back, and around her neck hung a delicate gold chain with a pendant shaped like a phoenix. She adjusted it carefully, her reflection glowing with grace and certainty. "They tried to erase me," she whispered to herself, a soft smile curving her lips. "But I became unforgettable." The camera slowly faded from her image to the children at her foundation, playing, learning, creating. A girl with a missing front tooth painted a crown on a canvas. A boy recited a poem about courage. Another child folded paper stars with the words, "I am enough," written in crayon. Amina's voice returned one last time, this time not as a daughter, not as a victim, but as a storyteller. They handed her shame. She turned it into gold. In the fire of rejection, she forged her crown. And from the ashes of her name, she rose with wings no one could cut again. The end.